Most people in their 60s who've spent a lifetime saving, really saving, are sitting on a number they're proud of. A healthy 401k, a traditional IRA, maybe both. And the plan, as far as they understand it, is simple. Leave it alone. Let it grow. Don't touch it until the government makes you. That's not a plan. That's a delay. I'll be honest with you. For a long time, I believed the same thing. Keep the money in the tax-deferred account as long as possible. Why hand the IRS $1 before you have to? It felt like discipline, like winning. Then I started looking at tax returns. Not from clients who'd failed to save, from the ones who'd done everything right. And what I kept seeing wasn't wealth. It was a slow-moving problem that nobody had warned them about and that their surviving spouses were now paying for. Here's what the research actually shows. 84% of retirees, when they reach the age where RMD kicks in, take out the bare minimum. And about 80% don't touch these accounts at all before they're legally required to. That's not caution. That's a pattern, a very expensive one. The government built a clock into your retirement account the day you opened it. That clock doesn't care about your income, your plans, your health, or how your spouse will manage alone. At age 73 or 75, depending on when you were born, it goes off. And whatever's in that account gets pulled out, taxed as ordinary income, every year, whether you need the money or not. And if your account has been sitting untouched while the market did its thing, that number may be much larger than you expected, which means the tax bill is too. There's a window between now and that clock. If you're 55 to 65, you're standing in it. Most people don't realize that. They're focused on not making a mistake, and in doing so, they are making one, a quiet one. This video is about that window, what it is, why it matters, and why the way most people are using it, or rather, not using it, is quietly setting up a crisis that doesn't hit them. It hits the person they leave behind. Before we get into how to fix it, let's be clear on exactly how IRS built this trap in the first place. Welcome to Wes Investor. Let's start with the basics, because the basics are where most people get it wrong. A traditional 401k or IRA is a tax-deferred account. Not tax-free, tax-deferred. That distinction is the whole thing. Every dollar you put in went in before taxes. Every year it grew without being taxed. The IRS was patient. They were always going to collect. They just agreed to wait. RMD, required minimum distribution, is when the waiting ends. Starting at a certain age, the government requires you to withdraw a specific amount from your pre-tax retirement accounts each year. That withdrawal gets counted as ordinary income, and you pay taxes on it at whatever rate applies to your total income that year. Social Security, pension, investment income, all of it added together. You don't get to choose whether to take it. You don't get to choose how much, beyond the minimum. The IRS calculates it based on your account balance and a life expectancy table they maintain. You follow the formula or you face a penalty. Now, SE Cure 2. 0 changed the starting age. If you were born before 1960, your RMD age is 73. If you were born in 1960 or later, it's 75. That sounds like more time. For some people, it is. For others, it just means a larger account balance sitting untouched longer, which means larger distributions and a larger tax bill when the clock finally runs out. The penalty for missing an RMD used to be 50% of the amount you failed to withdraw. Congress reduced it to 25% under SE Cure 2.0. That sounds like an improvement. It is not something you want to test. Here's what that looks like in practice. Say your required distribution for the year is $42,000, and you forget, or you're in the hospital, or your advisor dropped the ball. The IRS doesn't care why. They assess 25% on the shortfall. That's $10,500 gone. before you've even done anything with the money you were supposed to withdraw. But the penalty isn't really the problem. The penalty is the visible part. The real issue is what happens when people do follow the rules. Because 84% of retirees take exactly the minimum, not a dollar more. And on the surface, that sounds responsible. You're complying. You're not taking more than you have to. What actually happens is this. If your account is growing at a rate faster than you're withdrawing, the balance increases, which means next year's required distribution is larger, which means more income, more taxes, potentially a higher bracket. The account keeps growing, the distributions keep climbing, and the tax exposure compounds year after year. I've seen this play out more times than I'd like to count. Someone reaches 73 with $800,000 in a traditional IRA they haven't touched. They're proud of it. Then the first distribution hits maybe $30,000. The second year, it's $33,000. By 80, they're pulling $50,000 or more whether they need it or not. And it's all taxable income stacking on top of everything else. The account didn't protect them. It accumulated quietly, and then it started demanding to be paid back on the IRS's schedule, not theirs. I'll say this plainly. CCure 2.0's rules, the cutoff ages, the 70.5 legacy threshold, the 73 versus 75 split, it's legitimately complex. I use a spreadsheet to track it myself, and I work with financial professionals who do the same. You don't need to memorize the entire law. You need to know your own number, your own timeline, and what's sitting in your own account. The mechanics of RMD aren't what should scare you. What should get your attention is the behavioral trap underneath them, the one that's driving that 84% statistic in the first place. Here's something nobody talks about in retirement planning content. The math is actually the easy part. The harder part is getting someone who has spent 35 years building a habit of not touching their money to suddenly start spending it. Deliberately, strategically, before they have to. That's not a financial problem. That's a psychological one. And it has a name. I call it the super saver's curse. If you've been a disciplined saver your whole working life, that discipline became part of how you see yourself. The person who didn't splurge, who maxed the 401k every year, who drove the car an extra 3 years instead of upgrading. That identity doesn't just disappear the day you retire. So when a financial planner sits across from you and says, "We should start pulling money out of your IRA now," even though you don't need it yet, and yes, you'll pay taxes on it, every instinct you've built over decades pushes back. It feels wrong. It feels like losing. I understand that feeling. When I helped my own parents start drawing down the savings they'd spent their whole lives building, watching that balance go down on purpose, even knowing the reason created a real tension. That's not a client story. That's my own experience with it. The instinct to protect the number runs deep, even when you know better. But here's what that instinct is actually doing to your family. When both spouses are alive and filing jointly, the tax brackets are wider. A taxable income of $110,000 might sit comfortably in the 12% bracket. You're managing. The RMDs arrive, you pay your taxes, and life continues. Then one spouse dies. The surviving spouse now files as single. Same income. Same RMDs arriving every year, whether they need the money or not. But the tax brackets for single filers are roughly half as wide. That $110,000 in taxable income that was sitting in the 12% bracket for a married couple, for a single filer in 2026, it pushes into the 22% bracket, and depending on the total, potentially higher. The income didn't change. The RMD didn't change. The tax bill did. That's the widow's tax penalty. It's not a punishment the IRS designed specifically to hurt grieving spouses. It's just how the brackets work. But the effect is the same. The person left behind, at the most vulnerable moment of their life, absorbs a tax increase they never planned for and often never saw coming. And here's the part that's hardest to sit with. The account that created this problem was built with the best intentions. Every dollar saved was an act of care for the family. But because the strategy never adjusted, because the balance kept growing untouched through the go-go years, when there was still energy to travel, to enjoy, to spend, the compounding continued. The RMDs grew, and the surviving spouse inherited not just the grief, but the tax bill that came with it. I've watched people enter what should have been the most active years of their retirement, late 50s, early 60s, still healthy, still mobile, and talk themselves out of every trip, every experience, every upgrade, protecting the number, waiting. By the time their health started to shift and the no-go years arrived, the account was larger than ever, and the person they loved most was left holding it alone. The super saver's curse doesn't just cost you experiences. It transfers risk to the person least equipped to absorb it. To protect your spouse from that outcome, you can't wait until 73. The window to act is now, and it's already open. It's called the 10-year golden window, and how you use it, or don't use it, is what determines which side of this equation your family ends up on. If you're between 55 and 65 right now, something unusual is happening in your financial life, even if it doesn't feel that way. For many people in this range, income is starting to ease. Maybe you've cut back hours. Maybe you retired early. Maybe you're living off savings while you wait to claim Social Security. Whatever the reason, your taxable income this year might be lower than it's been in decades, and you're not yet required to take RMDs, and Social Security may not have started yet. That combination, lower income, no mandatory withdrawals, no benefit income stacking on top, creates a window. A gap in your tax exposure that most people don't recognize as an opportunity because it doesn't feel like one. It just feels like a quieter year. This is the 10-year golden window, and it is the most underused planning period in retirement. The core idea is straightforward. If your taxable income is temporarily low, you have room inside the lower tax brackets that you're not filling. You could move money from your pre-tax accounts into tax-advantaged structures now at a rate you control, rather than waiting for the IRS to force distributions later at a rate you don't. But there's a second threat most people in this window aren't thinking about. It's called IRMAA. IRMAA stands for Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. It's not a tax, technically. It's a Medicare surcharge. But the effect on your finances is the same. Here's how it works. Medicare calculates your Part B and Part D premiums based on your income from 2 years prior. If your income crosses certain thresholds, your monthly premium goes up significantly. For 2026, the safe zone is $109,000 for single filers and $218,000 for married couples filing jointly, based on 2024 income. Cross that line by a single dollar, just $1, and your Medicare Part B premium jumps by $81.20 per month per person. That's an extra $974.40 per year per person for crossing an invisible line you may not have even seen coming. And IRMAA has multiple tiers. The further over the threshold your income lands, the higher the surcharge climbs. Now think about what happens when someone waits until 73 to start taking distributions. They've been letting the account grow for years. Social Security is now in payment. Maybe there's a pension. Then the RMD arrives, not a small one, a large one, because the balance has been compounding untouched, and it stacks on top of everything else. Total income spikes. IRMAA triggers, tax bracket shifts, all in the same year. I've sat with someone who came in holding a Medicare adjustment letter they didn't understand. They weren't upset about a major financial decision. They'd simply pulled an extra $1,500 from their IRA 1 year to repair their roof. That one withdrawal, which felt entirely reasonable in the moment, pushed their income just past the IRMAA threshold. The surcharge they paid over the following year cost them more than the repair itself. That's not a story about bad luck. That's a story about invisible lines and the cost of not knowing where they are. The 10-year golden window exists precisely because those lines are manageable right now, while income is lower, while there's flexibility, while you still have time to move money on your own terms. The alternative is arriving at 73 with a larger balance, a higher RMD, Social Security income already in play, and no room left to maneuver. Paying a controlled amount of tax at 60 is a completely different situation than being squeezed by the IRS at 75. Fear of paying tax today isn't protecting your retirement. It's just moving the cost to a year when you'll have less control over it. The tools to change that outcome exist. They're legal, they're straightforward, and the window to use them is right now. So we've established the problem. The RMD clock is running. The widow's tax penalty is real. IRMAA is sitting at the edge of your income like a tripwire. And the 10-year golden window is the period where you still have room to do something about all of it. The question is what exactly to do. There are two tools that do the heavy lifting here. They're both legal, both IRS approved, and both significantly underused by people who would benefit from them most. The first is a Roth conversion. A Roth conversion means you take money out of your traditional pre-tax account, your 401k, your traditional IRA, pay the income tax on it now, and move it into a Roth IRA. That sounds counterintuitive if you've spent decades avoiding taxes on that money. But here's what you're actually buying with that tax payment. Once the money is in a Roth IRA, it grows tax-free. Not tax-deferred, tax-free. You will never owe taxes on the growth. You will never be required to take distributions from it during your lifetime. And if your spouse inherits it, they have significantly more flexibility in how and when they access it, without the same RMD obligations that come with a traditional account. The conversion itself is taxable income in the year you do it. That's the short-term cost. But if you're doing it during the golden window, when your income is lower, when there's room inside the 12% or 22% bracket, before Social Security stacks on top, you're paying that tax at the lowest rate you may see for the rest of your life. The strategy isn't to convert everything at once. It's to convert deliberately, year by year, filling the available bracket space without pushing yourself into a higher tier or triggering IRMAA. Done carefully over several years, a meaningful portion of your pre-tax balance can be moved into a Roth at a manageable tax cost. Think about two scenarios side by side. In the first, you leave $400,000 in a traditional IRA untouched until 73. By then, assuming modest growth, you might be looking at $600,000 or more. Your first RMD on that balance could be $23,000 or higher, stacking on top of Social Security and any other income. In the second scenario, you convert $30,000 to $40,000 per year during your 60s, paying tax at 12% or 22%, and arrive at 73 with a significantly smaller pre-tax balance. The RMD is smaller, the tax exposure is smaller, and your spouse has a Roth account available to them with no strings attached. That difference is not a minor adjustment. That is the difference between a retirement tax strategy and no strategy at all. The second tool is a Qualified Charitable Distribution, or QCD. This one is specifically for people who are already at RMD age 73 or older and who have any interest in charitable giving, even modest amounts. A QCD allows you to transfer money directly from your IRA to a qualified charity. The transfer satisfies your RMD obligation for the year. But, and this is the part that matters, the money never appears in your adjusted gross income. Compare that to the standard path. You take a $42,000 RMD, it counts as $42,000 of ordinary income. You pay taxes on it at your marginal rate, and then you donate some portion to charity and hope the deduction helps. With a QCD, the $42,000 goes directly from the IRA to the charity. Your RMD obligation is met. Your AGI doesn't move, IRMAA doesn't trigger, your tax bracket doesn't shift. Under current IRS rules for 2026, the annual QCD limit has been adjusted upward for inflation to approximately $111,000 per person. That's a substantial amount of assets that can be redirected out of the RMD system entirely for those who qualify and choose to use it. To be clear on who this applies to, QCDs require you to be 70 and a half or older, and the funds must go directly from the IRA to the charity, no detour through your bank account. If the money touches your hands first, it no longer qualifies. Used together, these two tools cover most of the ground. Roth conversions during the golden window reduce the pre-tax balance before RMDs begin. QCDs after 70 and a half reduce the taxable impact of the distributions that do arrive. Neither one eliminates taxes entirely. That's not the goal. The goal is control. Paying taxes on your schedule at a rate you chose rather than on the IRS's schedule at a rate you didn't. If you're seriously considering a Roth conversion strategy this year, drop the word or OT in the comments below. It helps me understand what content to keep building, and it tells me who in this community is actually moving from information to action. Because knowing the tools is only half of it. Putting them into a real plan for your specific numbers is where it actually counts. Let's bring this back to what actually matters. RMD is not a retirement income strategy. It was never designed to be one. It's a collection mechanism. The government gave you decades of tax-deferred growth, and at a certain age, they start collecting what they're owed. The formula, the timeline, the penalty structure, none of it was built around your needs. It was built around theirs. When you treat the RMD minimum as your withdrawal plan, you're not being conservative. You're outsourcing one of the most consequential financial decisions of your life to a government formula that has no idea what your income looks like, what your spouse will need, or what your health trajectory is going to be. Pulling back and protecting the balance feels safe. It is not safe. It is a transfer of risk from today, where you have options, to a future year where you have fewer of them. The tax doesn't disappear. It waits, and it grows along with the account. The super saver's curse is real, and it's not a character flaw. It's what happens when a lifetime of disciplined behavior meets a set of rules that were never explained clearly. You saved well. That part worked. The part that didn't work was the assumption that the same approach that built the account would also protect it. It won't. The widow's tax penalty isn't theoretical. It's a structural feature of how single and joint filing brackets interact with mandatory distributions. If your spouse survives you, and statistically, one of you will outlive the other by years, sometimes a decade or more, the tax environment they inherit is shaped directly by the choices you make right now in this window, while both of you are still here to plan together. And IRMAA doesn't announce itself in advance. It shows up 2 years later on a Medicare notice for income you earned in a year you may have already forgotten. The people who avoid these outcomes aren't the ones who got lucky. They're the ones who understood that the 10-year golden window between 55 and 65 is not a waiting room. It's the planning room. And they used it. That means looking at Roth conversions while the tax brackets are lower. It means understanding where the IRMAA thresholds sit and keeping income underneath them. It means, if you're charitably inclined, using QCDs to satisfy RMD obligations without adding to your taxable income. And it means having a clear picture of what your surviving spouse will actually face financially when the time comes. None of this requires perfection. It requires a plan. Paying a controlled amount of tax today is not losing. It's buying back control over the years when control matters most, when health starts to shift, when one of you is navigating things alone, when the last thing you want is an unexpected tax bill arriving alongside everything else. Don't let the super saver's curse take that from you. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what's actually at stake in the next decade of your financial life, subscribe to Wes Investor. This is the kind of planning that doesn't make headlines, but it's the kind that protects families. We cover it here in plain language on a regular basis. The window is open. Use it.